And that's where I first started singing. I started singing at a place called the Birdland in Munich, Germany.
Wow.
And I actually made more money than they made in the Army. So
Right.
when I got back to Detroit, I formed a little trio. And we played a place called Mall's Lounge. And
Okay.
that's where I really met most of the Motown people. I met James Jamerson, David Ruffin used to come down, Levi. I got a chance to hang out with all of the great Motown acts. I didn't know why they were coming to listen to me, because I was the guy that was trying to make a living.
Right.
You know, they were stars. And one day, I never will forget James Jamerson,
Yeah.
the great bassist, God bless him.
Amazing, amazing bass player.
He asked me to come to Motown to take an audition. And I said, for what? He said, don't you want to record? And I really thought about it. I said, well, I don't really know, man, whether I'm good enough to be a recording artist. I said, I can sing everybody's songs, but you know, I'm just making a living. And so I went down and I took an audition with Mr. Gordy, and I never will forget it was Love Is a Hurting Thing by Lou Rawls. And Mr. Gordy was one of those kind of guys, he'd look at you, you don't know whether he like you or not. He just see, he just stare at you. And I didn't hear from him for a while. So finally, they called me down to Motown, and they said, well, we're going to sign you to a contract, but we're not going to record you. It's a true story. I never will forget it. And I said, well, why? And they said, we're going to give you $500 a week. I said, oh, okay. So anyway, this went on for about 2 or 3 years. I did not know that this man, he had the Contours,
Yep.
and the Temptations, and a whole bunch of groups there. I was a reserve, and I didn't know it. So when one of the Contours got sick, the lead singer, they called me one day and they said, we need you to go out with the Contours.
Right.
So I learned their songs. I went out with the Contours. And the first professional show I ever did, we opened up for a young group called the Temptations.
Right.
And that's when I really got the itch. I met Eddie and Dave, and I seen him looking at me in the wings. I said, "Is that good or bad?" You know?
Right, right.
So that was my first. And then of course, you know, when me and David had became really, really good friends.
Yeah, right.
David Ruffin, and I never will forget. About 3 o'clock one morning, he had came to my house and he opened the door and I said, "David, it's 3 o'clock, man." And he says, "I'm gonna leave the Temptations." And I was you don't know, if you were a Temptation fan back in the early days, these guys were like a machine. You know, although it was a great opportunity, I tried my best to talk him into staying with the Temptations because I loved them, man. They were a man's dream to watch him routine, to watch him spin that Michael Noun, and I mean, they were Temptations. And when he finished talking to me about they had differences and he was concerned about not making enough money. Anyway, long story short, he was going to leave. And next morning, they called me down, true enough, and they asked me, they said, "How would you like to be a member of the Temptations?" And I never will forget what I told them. I said, "Well, I would love to." I said, "But I want to be accepted by Eddie, Otis, Paul, and Melvin."
Right.
I said, because, and also I want to let them know I can never be a David Ruffin. I said, but I think I can sing.
Right.
But you know, you have to be like that when you're replacing a legend.
Yeah.
You know, the worst thing would have been is if I couldn't have made it.
Right.
You know, if I had to come back home, and so that's how I became a member of the Temptations.
Right.